Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parkinson's Foundation's Wellness Wednesdays webinar. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin soon. Please know we are recording today's presentation, and you will receive a follow-up email from us with a link to today's recording and additional resources in about 1 week. Since we're just over the 1 o'clock hour, we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get into it, I want to remind you about our other PD Health at Home virtual programs. Each week, we offer sessions tailored to support people with Parkinson's and their care partners, including Mindfulness Mondays, Wellness Wednesdays, Fitness Fridays, our expert briefing series, and our Spanish language programming, Y Salud en Casa. Be sure to visit our website by scanning the QR code to see what's coming up and explore our archived videos on YouTube. PD Health at Home is presented by the Light of Day Foundation, whose generosity has made this programming series possible. Today's PD Health at Home Wellness Wednesday webinar is an overview of the Foundation's PDGENEration study, including its mission and the exciting progress made so far. We want to thank today's webinar sponsor, Prevail Therapeutics, for supporting the mission of the Parkinson's Foundation. On the screen, you'll see a little flow of our agenda today. We'll welcome the Foundation's Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. James Beck, to give us an overview of the origins and achievements of our PDGENEration study thus far. And then we'll hear from PDGENEration's participants, sharing about their decisions and their results and the steps that they took based on the results that they received. And we're welcoming Jennifer Verbrugge from the Indiana University School of Medicine, who will talk about the importance of genetic counseling and its role in the PDGENEration study. And Jim will come back to share about our hopes and the future directions of where PDGENEration will take us. We'll conclude our time together with a Q&A session with Jim, Jennifer, and Lisa that will also turn into a discussion. So I hope you guys will stick around for the full comprehensive program today. To kick us off, I'm honored to introduce Dr. James Beck, Chief Scientific Officer at the Parkinson's Foundation. He leads the Foundation's research strategy, directing over $400 million in funding to better understand and treat Parkinson's disease. Dr. Beck launched PDGENEration, a global study offering free genetic testing and counseling, and has championed patient-centered research that reflects the real needs of the Parkinson's community. He's also played a key role in national efforts to update Parkinson's data and influence public health policy. Jim, thanks for joining us today. Oh, sorry, I muted you.
That's quite all right. Thanks very much, Chris. I very much appreciate the introduction. And what a pleasure it is to be able to be on the other side of this. Before we begin, of course, the Parkinson's Foundation is, as Krista mentioned, and part of my work is to really build upon the community as a whole. We are focused very much on improving care for people with Parkinson's and advancing research towards a cure. And as I hope you'll see from this webinar today, we're deeply involved in the community and their input. And so we'd love to hear from yours as well today. So please take advantage of the Q&A option at the bottom and other questions that may come in as part of the process. Our goals at the Foundation are really threefold, which is improving care for everyone with Parkinson's, advancing research towards a cure, as I said, and empowering and educating our community, which is what I really am pleased that our Wellness Wednesdays are able to do as part of that process. Next slide. Great, and next slide after that, please. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about PDGENEration, as Krista mentioned at the top of our hour. And the next slide really breaks it down into the origins and achievements of the Foundation. If we could just advance to the next slide. Great. So prior to PDGENEration, one of the things that we faced with clinical trials in general, in addition to where we potentially were going with genetic studies, is that often clinical trials failed. For reasons that were, many-fold. A key one is unable to fulfill enrollment for these trials, unable to identify enough people with Parkinson's who could participate and enroll in order to test medicines, whether they were effective or not. Sometimes when they were able to enroll enough people, they didn't meet the primary endpoints to show that this medicine was efficacious at either improving symptoms or even, or what we all hope for is stopping the disease. So Other things that we've seen with other studies is they didn't really involve, for research participants, returning results back to them. They didn't necessarily know what was going on as part of the process. And too often we've seen clinical trials that were not generalizable. They really only targeted one group of individuals. And when we recognize we're such a multifaceted country, and in fact, medicine treats so many different people, it's important to be able to test them in a variety of individuals to understand that the results we see with one group are going to be the same with others. And we know for a fact that's not always the case with other medicines. So the next slide will show that PDGENEration has come along as a way to solve some of those problems, particularly in relevance to genetics. And I'll talk a little bit about the importance of genetics in Parkinson's in just a moment. But PDGENEration, what we're offering is genetic testing at no cost to participants. So this is high quality, clinical grade genetic testing for individuals. It's open to anybody with Parkinson's. Just have to be generally over the age of 18. But we've been able to set up the study so that no matter where you are within the United States and in some of the other countries that we're growing to, that just about anyone can participate, regardless of their age, location, or other factors. And what's, I think, unique about PDGENEration, we have people who will be able to join us and really elaborate on it, is the importance of returning results back to participants. Again, one of our goals at the foundation is to empower people with knowledge. And here we really want to give people knowledge about their disease and let them use that knowledge to be able to improve their own status with Parkinson's, perhaps using that to make the affirmative decision to enroll in clinical trials that may offer medicines that are unique to their particular genetic makeup. So in the next slide, we talk about what might increase risk for people with Parkinson's disease. If we go, let's see, maybe, can I advance? Oh, maybe I can. No, it doesn't seem to let me advance to the slides. But
I'll give you
next
slide
slide.
control, Jim.
Okay, great, thank you. Great, thank you, Krista. So when we talk about like things that might increase a person's risk for Parkinson's disease, age remains the biggest risk factor. But there are other things that play a role too. Genetics, which is the topic of our conversation today. Certain medicines can impact Parkinson's disease, particularly what we know are drugs which are illicit drugs that have been manufactured by someone on the street. Exposure to toxins is a key thing, whether they could be from pesticides, heavy metals, or other things. Brain injury is another potential risk factor for Parkinson's. And the military is in and of itself, because it can include exposure to toxins as part of the active duty. It can also include potential for brain injury for those who've been in combat or even in part of just normal duty, perhaps an auto accident or something like that as part of the process. So when we, again, think about individuals as part of this process, we can recognize that people with Parkinson's may not have exposure to all those different risk factors, but individual ones can potentially contribute. And understanding that, it was important to understanding Parkinson's disease, but what we think is unique to all of them, or I should say common to all of these individuals, is genetics. And so a deeper understanding of genetics is really important as part of the process. We know that in our panel, there are 7 primary genes which we are testing for. These are the most common of what are really rare forms of Parkinson's disease. So when we talk about genetic forms of Parkinson's disease, it's important to recognize that not everybody has this clear genetic link that we're identifying as part of our PDGENEration study, but for certain, some individuals do. And these are genes which are not only the most common of rare forms of Parkinson's disease, but also where pharmaceutical companies are spending the time to develop novel medicines to potentially halt Parkinson's disease for these individuals, but we think can also be used more broadly within the PD population. As we've launched PDGENEration early in 2020, we were just moving along slowly, and then changed different phases, and to where we are now, where we have a really expansive approach to including people with Parkinson's disease, and we've reached over 24,000 participants. But what's interesting to know is, even though we've been talking about PDGENEration for a while, there's still a lot of people who don't know about PDGENEration, or don't know about the importance fact of participating in genetic research and how that can advance not only information about themselves, but really the science underlying Parkinson's disease, because there's still so much we do not know. Some other numbers to share, as I mentioned, over 24,000 enrolled. We have over 2,000 veterans who've not only donated their time and lives to service to the country, but also here service to research as well, sharing their genetic information as part of this process. A lot of individuals we find are newly diagnosed, been in the last 3 years. And what's really exciting to see is that over 70% of individuals participating in PDGENEration are new to clinical research. And we're so excited to get individuals involved in research and participating in this way as part of the process.
Oops, it looks like we lost Krista. Give us 1 second.
Excuse the technical difficulties. Okay, if we can just advance to the next slide.
And Jim, you've got slide control again.
Unfortunately, I'm seeing your whole screen, Brianna, as opposed to the window you just moved off to the side.
How does this look?
That looks great. Thank you very much. Perfect. And so with the success of being able to reach everybody, reach 24,000 people with Parkinson's disease, clearly we really worked very hard to reach people in every state. And I'm really pleased today that one of the individuals we've been able to reach is from Hawaii. Despite the fact that people often get care at physical sites, we've been able to combine the approach where people can participate in PDGENEration often at their clinician if they're participating in the study, or just by participating in PDGENEration through our website, where they can, if you have Parkinson's disease, you can sign up and enroll in the study as part of the process. We've also been able to, if we move to the next slide, Brianna, we've also been able to reach international, beyond the United States, and reach internationally as well. We're in Canada, and as well as in LATAM, the Latin American region, and we soon hope to expand to other countries in South America as well. We're also, importantly, in Israel as well. There's a number of individuals with genetic forms of Parkinson's disease there, so it's important to be able to, as we think about trying to understand the complex genetic architecture of the disease, be able to reach people where they are as part of the process. In the next slide, we see that of the individuals we've tested to date and have the results back on, we've tested over 24,000 individuals, but the results haven't come back, so I can't report them here. But for the roughly 18,000 individuals with the results back to share, we see that most people of the 7 genes in our panel have a predisposition to having a genetic link to the GBA gene. They have a variant in that gene that is probably linked to their Parkinson's disease, followed by LRRK2. And these are 2 very common genes that are impact Parkinson's disease, and where we're beginning to see some of the very first efforts for clinical trials looking to enroll individuals who may have variants in either one of these genes. And then followed by some more rare forms of Parkinson's disease, Parkin mutations, and these other variants on the right-hand side as well. As you can see, by and large, most people have a LRRK2 mutation or GBA mutation, followed by these others, which can be barely breaking the double digits, even though we have so many participants as part of the process. What's really exciting about PDGENEration is the ease at which you can participate in it. And oops, so I went back. And now we're utilizing a TASO kit. Because of the amount of information we want to share with researchers and in as efficient way as possible, we're collecting blood as part of PDGENEration. A lot of people don't like needle punctures. I certainly don't either. But this is a very simple, near painless process that allows us to collect blood from the upper arm, the capillaries, and in a very easy way. And it's less than a quarter of a teaspoon. It's less than an eighth of a teaspoon, in fact, of blood that we collect. And then as part of this process, we're able to analyze the information in that sample, isolate the DNA, and then analyze that DNA for research purposes. But I think it's important to recognize here is that as we process the DNA, get the results back, share them with participants, we're also sharing this more widely with the broader research community. And as of today, we have over 10,000 samples have been shared with the broader research community. We hope to increase that number by 50% by the end of this year. It takes a fair bit to process that data to make it ready for researchers globally, but it's something that we're very committed to do as part of the process. And what's also exciting is that as part of our genetic testing program, we're not only testing the 7 same genes we've been testing since the onset of our study in 2020, we're now also testing some other secondary genes as part of the process. These are these 21 genes up here in the top are related to Parkinson's disease or Parkinsonisms. So they can be mutations which can masquerade as Parkinson's disease, as well as we think since we're testing this many people with a very sophisticated process, is to now be able to offer genetic testing for what are considered tier 1 genes from the CDC. These are genes which are genetic disorders for which we have clear therapies. And so being able to identify them is something that we think is a service to the Parkinson's community as part of the process. So what I want to do now is turn it over and talk about to our participants and talk about the motivations that they had for participating in PDGene. These are pre-recorded videos that we'll share. And Lisa Kirk is in one of these videos, and she'll join us live at the end of the Q&A session. So I'll now turn it over to my colleagues to start the video.
In 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I am a PDGENEration participant and proud of it. Well, I have a 17-year-old cattle dog who was my search and rescue partner for 10 years and 17 and going strong. And then I have an 8-year-old dog who had been in training to be a cadaver dog, but turned out to be dog reactive, loves people, hates dogs. So washed him, but it was around that time I got diagnosed and I stopped going out in the field. But I'm still involved in search and rescue. And honestly, everything I've learned from Parkinson's tells me I don't have to stop doing the things I love. I may have to adjust, modify, make it work for me, but I don't stop. I love my life. I think I had 2 main incentives, and one was the realization that as a Parkinson's patient, as a person living with Parkinson's, everything I experience in terms of my treatment has come from other people who stepped up, got involved, made a commitment to a research study or a trial. And I wanted to pay back. I wanted to, what's the word? Pay it forward. I wanted to pay it forward and make a difference for other people. That's always motivated me. And the second was the understanding that what knowledge I gained about my own DNA is something that I could share with family. And as a result of the study, I learned that I have the GBA. They call it a variation, right? I always used to say mutation made me feel like, oh, X-Men. But understanding that I have the variation, the gene variation that can not, it doesn't guarantee that I'm going to get Parkinson's, but it helps my family know what to look for and what might be possible for them. So that was important to me as well. People may not understand that every time there's a research study, the organizers have to they have to jump through tremendous hoops to even just get the project going. And in other words, it's one of the safest things you can do. You know exactly what to expect. Well, even if it's a double blind, you know what's going on. You're well informed and people are watching out for you. And every clinical trial that becomes available to us makes a difference for people who come after us. Well, actually makes a difference for us in our own lives, because because of the treatment that we get and the knowledge that we gain from individually from each clinical trial. Even in the PDGENEration, again, I felt very personally cared for. It was a no-brainer to be involved. Well, for one thing, it was immediate. I was at the doctor's office, they brought it up, and I said, sure, sign me up. And they got me in, you know, because the first step is you give blood, and they walked me over and we did it right away. So it was quick, it was easy, it was painless. Well, mostly painless, and definitely worthwhile. I knew this was an important project to be part of. It was very simple. They explained what was involved in the project, walked me over to the diagnostic center where they took my blood. I think they take like 4 vials of blood, I'm not sure. And that was it. That was all I needed to actually do. And then after that, periodically I'd get a report about how the project was going as a whole. The genetic counseling is thorough. I was really impressed. So I learned that, which I'd never known before in my life, that I have a Ashkenazi background. And learning what that meant, because Ashkenazi have a high association with Parkinson's. Oh, the first thing I did was pick up the phone and call my brother and tell him, you know, if you get a chance, get your DNA checked, look for this GBA mutation, and just be aware that it's in our family. Okay, when I received my results, I immediately contacted my family, talked with my brother, my niece, my nephew, explained that this GBA mutation does exist in our family, but it's not a guarantee that anyone's going to get Parkinson's. Just there's a higher association. It was empowering. The results gave me a clear idea of my family and myself, why Parkinson's became such a big part of my life, and what I could do about it. It cemented my desire and my willingness to participate in studies, because of the knowledge I gained about myself. And I thought, I don't want to stop here. I want to learn more. I got more involved in the community, the Parkinson's community, and started helping other people learn about living their best life with Parkinson's. That Parkinson's is not an end by any means. It's really a beginning. I've learned more about myself, my family, my background, my heritage than I knew before I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Don't hesitate. You have so much to gain from participating, nothing to lose, everything to gain. And if you were motivated by the thought of paying it forward, of making a difference for other people, then this is where you can do that. The 2 things that make the most difference for me are 1, getting involved in clinical trials, and 2, support groups. In those 2 actions, I feel it changed my sense of empowerment about Parkinson's, and gave me a real purpose in my life.
Hi, I'm Ken Thurman, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's 7.5 years ago, and have been active with the foundation for most of that time. Fairly recently, I went through the PDGENEration program, and part of my reason for doing that is I'm of Ashkenazi Jewish background. And while nobody else in my family that I knew of had that gene, I wanted to make sure that I didn't, and pass that information on to my son and my grandchildren. And for my grandchildren, I think it's particularly important because their mother was adopted. And so there's a whole piece of their genetic background that they don't really know. But as it turned out, I don't carry the gene, so that put us at a little bit more ease to that. One of my offspring is not going to end up with it. So some people don't want to know, but I think there's value in knowing, just so you can share with family members. I think the other thing that motivated me to do it was that this is a fantastic database for finding out genetic relationships, looking at even potential relationships among genes that we're not aware of or we haven't been aware of. So it's something to consider. The process itself is pretty simple. You get a little kit. I use the old kit, but the new kits now you just follow the step-by-step directions. You give a very small sample of blood. You send that back in, and you get results usually, I think, in about a month. And you actually talk with a genetic counselor who can help put the results in perspective, especially if those results are positive, that you have one of the genes that is connected to the development of Parkinson's. I should add also that just because you have the gene doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get Parkinson's, but it's still good to know. And I think that I rest a little easier, my wife rests easier, my son and his family rest a little easier because they know that I don't carry the gene. I guess what it did for me is to know that I didn't pass that gene on to my son or my grandchildren. Which gives you a certain peace of mind. You're never going to have complete peace of mind with Parkinson's and any other disease because there's multiple factors that attribute to the disease. So just because I know that I don't carry any of the genes that are related to the PDGENEration doesn't mean that I don't have a genetic component. But I can at least eliminate that one. I think that was my, knowing that was the main reason that I got tested. Sort of reiterating what I said, and I think there's a sense of, I don't want to say obligation, but some sense of I can contribute to knowledge about Parkinson's by participating in this study because it's such a fantastic gene, pool of genetic information. So another thing is that it sort of gives you a non-answer answer because it doesn't tell me how I got Parkinson's, but it lets me cross at least one thing off the list that doesn't account for why I have Parkinson's. Basically, I think this is worth doing because of some of the reasons I've already articulated. Gives you personal information, but at a broader level, you're contributing to a very important database with, frankly, very little effort on the part of the person who's participating. I mean, the whole procedure to get the little blood sample, maybe 10 minutes at the most, and you're contributing to what is really a remarkable database.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Ken, for sharing your experience with PDGENEration and the importance and the impact that it had on your lives. I really, really value your testament of how PDGENEration did impact you. So thank you so much for sharing. And now I'd like to introduce oh, my computer is having all kinds of problems today. Thank you all for your grace with me. I'm happy to introduce Jennifer, a certified genetic counselor with over 20 years of experience guiding individuals and families through genetic health information. She earned her master's in genetic counseling from Indiana University and has worked in both prenatal and research settings. Since 2014, Jennifer has been part of the Hereditary Genomics division at the Indiana University School of Medicine, where she provides remote genetic counseling for national Parkinson's research studies, including our very own PDGENEration. She's passionate about education and has developed resources to help patients and providers better understand genetics in Parkinson's disease. We're thrilled to have her join us today to talk about the role of genetic counseling in PDGENEration and to answer your questions. Jennifer, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come and share a little bit more information about genetic counseling, and especially in the PDGENEration research study. All right, next slide. Next slide.
Great, Jenny, I did give you slide control, so feel free to use your keyboard or your...
Oh, okay. Doesn't look like it's responding.
No worries, I've got you.
Okay, first disclosures. So as mentioned, I provide genetic counseling to participants in large Parkinson's research initiatives, including the PDGENEration study supported by the Parkinson's Foundation, as well as the Parkinson's Progression Markers Initiative, supported by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And I receive salary support from these foundations as well. All right, next slide. Okay, so first our learning objectives today. So in today's session, we'll walk through some key things together. We'll talk about what genetic counseling is, who provides it, and when it happens as part of the study, so you know exactly what to expect if you decide to participate. We'll go over what a genetic counseling session actually looks like, how it's done, what kinds of things are discussed, and how your results are shared. We'll also explore how genetic counseling can support you and your loved ones, especially if you're feeling maybe a little bit unsure and maybe have some questions about getting tested. And finally, we'll clear up some common questions or concerns that people may have about genetic counseling and genetic testing. All right, so what exactly is genetic counseling? Genetic counseling is a process where specialized professionals help individuals and families understand how their genes might affect their health and their family's health. During genetic counseling, we provide information, support, and guidance to help people make informed decisions and help people adapt to a genetic condition or the risk for a genetic condition. So today I'm going to share more details about how we do some of these things. Okay, so who provides genetic counseling? So in most cases, genetic counseling may be provided by a genetic counselor or sometimes by a physician. And this is typically how it works in the PDGENEration study. In the PDGENEration study, genetic counseling may be provided through a study site by a neurologist or by a genetic counselor that is actually located or works at that study site. Alternatively, genetic counseling may also be provided remotely by one of our genetic counselors at Indiana University, as our team functions as a remote genetic counseling center for the study. For those who are not familiar with genetic counselors are healthcare professionals who have specialized training in genetics and counseling. In the US, genetic counselors are master's trained professionals who've graduated from one of the 56 different accredited genetic counseling training programs. We sit for a certification exam after graduation and are certified. You'll see the CGC designation after our name. We may also be licensed, as many of the 50 states also require genetic counselors to hold a license. Genetic counselors practice in many different areas of medicine, including neurology and research, which is, of course, my area of practice. But some other common areas of practice include prenatal care, pediatrics, cancer, and cardiology. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when does genetic counseling happen? In general, genetic counseling can often occur paired with genetic testing. And when it occurs paired with genetic testing, it may occur before or after genetic testing, or perhaps during both timeframes. When it occurs prior to genetic testing, we call this pretest genetic counseling. And when it occurs following genetic testing, we call this post-test genetic counseling. During pretest genetic counseling, a genetic counselor will focus on explaining the benefits, the risks, and the limitations of the test, and really help a person determine their readiness for whether they want to proceed with genetic testing. And then during post-test genetic counseling, the focus is mainly explaining the impact and meaning of test results on the individual as well as on their family. It is also worth mentioning, though, that there's many different situations where it can still be beneficial for an individual to meet with a genetic counselor, even when genetic testing is not performed. So our job is really to provide information, support, and guidance, really regardless of whether genetic testing is involved. Also, genetic counseling may be provided as an in-person, face-to-face interaction, or it may be provided remotely through the use of the telephone or through video conferencing applications like Zoom, for example. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's review some information about the role of genetic counseling in the PDGENEration study. So in the PDGENEration study, pretest genetic counseling is not a standard part of the protocol, but instead the study offers really a comprehensive pretest educational process for all participants through a variety of different mechanisms and activities. So first, a participant can watch about a 10-minute video that explains the genetic testing process in the study. Also details about the genetic testing process, the methods, as well as the potential benefits, limitations, and risks are outlined in the informed consent document. This is a very important document, and participants should thoroughly read and review the informed consent document, and also know they have the opportunity to discuss their questions with study contacts, which most often is going to be initially a study coordinator through the study site. Study coordinators are really there to help answer your questions, but certain questions that maybe the study coordinator can't answer can certainly be escalated to either the site investigator or neurologist or genetic counselor. And really the purpose of the informed consent process is to ensure that you understand what's being asked of you, the study process, including the genetic testing, and that you're making an informed decision. All participants in the PDGENEration study receive post-test genetic counseling where their test results are disclosed and then explained. And really the purpose of providing genetic counseling along with the results disclosure is really to help participants understand the meaning of their results. And this is especially important in Parkinson's disease. As I think it's been mentioned, the causes and the genetics of Parkinson's are really very complex. So as genetic counselors, we help people kind of navigate through and understand the complex architecture of the genetics of Parkinson's. All right, so next slide. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, the pretest education and the post-test genetic counseling. I wanted to take a little bit of time to walk through some important sort of pretest considerations. And these are important things for people that have this question: should I have genetic testing for Parkinson's? So let's kind of walk through and think about some specific benefits, as well as some specific limitations and risks. So first, the benefits of doing genetic testing for Parkinson's. First, of course, learning that there might be a genetic link to Parkinson's could partially explain a cause. And for these individuals, I think many find getting an answer helpful and perhaps even empowering as well. Also, learning that there's a genetic link to Parkinson's may allow a person to maybe gain a little bit of insight about their Parkinson's symptoms. For example, we're learning that with certain genetic links to Parkinson's, some people may tend to progress faster or more slowly, or have a higher likelihood of having certain types of symptoms. That said, even the presence of a genetic cause to Parkinson's, we know we can certainly see variability that still goes unexplained. And with a genetic link to Parkinson's, individuals can certainly still follow their own unique pathway and own unique set of symptoms. Another benefit to genetic testing for Parkinson's that's been mentioned previously is, of course, those with a genetic cause to their Parkinson's may be eligible to participate in additional research, especially these gene-targeted clinical trials. And again, the PDGENEration study, as more people elect to be tested and more people learn their genetic status, researchers are hopeful that these efforts will really grow a study-eligible group or population of individuals that are ready to participate in these additional research studies, and hopefully move that knowledge and that research faster so that researchers can identify these new and effective therapies for people with Parkinson's. Also, many people gain a great deal of satisfaction and empowerment from knowing their participation has contributed to significant ways to the research efforts. I think this has been mentioned by some of our panelists today. And finally, many participants really want to learn more about their causes of Parkinson's so they can have more information to relay to relatives and their family members. Now, there's also important limitations and risks to consider before being tested. First, one thing we always like to point out is knowledge of one's genetic status won't yet currently change a doctor's approach to treatment yet in a big way. Genetic testing for Parkinson's generally does not provide a diagnosis. It doesn't change a person's clinical diagnosis. A clinical diagnosis is established through what we call a clinical examination of a patient, which includes a doctor looking for the presence of the characteristic symptoms, as well as a careful review of a patient's medical history. Also, there can be some insurance impacts to consider. Now, we do have a federal law called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, or GINA, that really does provide strong protections that prevent genetic discrimination in health insurance and employment. The GINA law means that health insurers and employers cannot ask you to provide your genetic test results for determination of things like eligibility or premiums. However, we always want people to be aware that this law does have gaps. This law does not apply to certain types of insurance, like life, long-term care, or disability insurance, meaning it may be legally permissible for these entities to ask people for their genetic testing results. Some states do have laws that do extend to broader protections regarding some of these other types of insurance. But also, again, we want to highlight so people are aware of the strong protections, but also what are some of the gaps. Also, another thing to consider is doing genetic testing is unique from other medical tests in that results may kind of impact and ripple out to family members. So an important consideration is really to inform and involve family members in the genetic testing process. Having discussions with family members before having genetic testing can be really helpful and can make having those family sharing conversations after following testing much easier. As mentioned earlier, genetic testing for Parkinson's is not diagnostic, and in fact, most people will receive negative results, meaning that the genetic test is not able to identify a known genetic cause for a person's Parkinson's. And this is really why genetic testing is not typically used during that diagnostic process. Finally, we know that the majority of people with Parkinson's really do tolerate receiving their genetic results, just fine. But we know that for some, it can create excess worries or anxieties. We've also learned that most who develop these types of responses, these anxieties and worries do seem to subside with time and as they adapt to the information that they've learned. So again, just some of the important things to think about and consider for those individuals who may be thinking about doing genetic testing for Parkinson's. Okay, so what can participants expect during post-test genetic counseling in the study? So let's walk through some details about this. So the first thing that happens during the genetic counseling session includes outlining the purpose and goals of the session. And, while there's typically an agenda that the genetic counselor will plan to follow during a session, an important step at the beginning of the session is really for the genetic counselor to understand what the participant may want from the session. That said, we understand that for many people, they may not be able to initially voice or maybe think about questions they have until they actually are able to hear the results. So we do try to tackle the result sharing very early in the session. Once results are shared, we'll take some time to explain what the results can and cannot tell us about Parkinson's. Also, the session will typically involve some type of information giving portion of the session. And this will often focus on having more of a discussion about what the causes of Parkinson's are, how genetics plays a role. Also, an important part of genetic counseling will include gathering information about your family history and then discussing how genetic test results may impact family members. Towards the close of a session, a genetic counselor will often summarize the key take-home points and then check in to make sure all questions have been answered, and then talk about next steps. Next steps may include providing guidance about things like sharing results with your doctor or with your family members. It may also include discussing useful resources. For example, some resources about learning about clinical trials and how to bring that information to your neurologist and have more of a discussion. Or we may offer some support information about support resources. And this is going to be guided based on participant interest and needs. So let's talk a little bit about how genetic counseling supports decisions. And we've kind of already talked a little bit about this today. So again, one big area where we support people making decisions is, that initial decision, should I have genetic testing? And again, our role and our job is to really make and ensure people are making an informed decision and make sure that they have enough information to make that informed decision. We also walk through information again about how should I share these results or who should I share these results with. And sometimes people, can be a bit nervous about having these conversations with family members. So we might provide extra tips or guidance, kind of have a discussion to make people think about how they may approach those conversations and how they can have them in the most effective way possible. And again, what should I do next is a common area of decisions. How a person may be able to use these results, who to share them with, and so forth. All right, next slide. So some common misconceptions and concerns that we also hear voiced often from participants during genetic counseling. And I would say the first two things that I've highlighted in red, these are things that often might be voiced just sort of immediately after a person receives negative results. Does this mean I actually don't have Parkinson's? So again, as we've walked through, genetic testing doesn't change a clinical diagnosis. So we're very careful to, explain what genetic testing results can tell us, but what they can't tell us. Another common question: has this ruled out a genetic cause? With the PDGENEration study, as we've talked about, one of the big purposes is really helping the research community learn more about the genetic connections to Parkinson's. And we certainly don't know everything about genetic causes. The study is testing for some of the most important and well-known genetic causes to Parkinson's, but we likely will learn new things with time as our knowledge, improves. Some of the common concerns we hear from participants: what happens to my genetic data? So the study takes a multi-layered approach to protect your genomic data. There are a number of different layers of technical considerations so that those who can access your data are only those with appropriate permissions. Also, when your genetic data or genomic data is shared with the research community, your personal identifiers like your name and your address are removed and not shared. Another, again, common concern: what does all this mean for my family? And again, during genetic counseling, part of our goal is to really personalize and tailor that information based on what we know about you from your genetic testing, your family history, and then to have a meaningful conversation to, kind of help you understand and answer some of those questions. All right, so what are the takeaways? So the goals of genetic counseling in the PDGENEration study: we hope to help people kind of navigate that kind of complex process of genetic testing and help them understand and break down the meaning of their genetic testing results. We, again, help people talk through and understand what results would mean for them, as well as some of the take-homes, what they might mean for their family members. And again, explain what results can tell us about Parkinson's and what they may not be able to tell us yet about Parkinson's. And most importantly, we hope that genetic counseling can empower people with Parkinson's as well as their family members with really this through the providing information, guidance, and support. And genetic counselors, other study personnel, we're here to help support you through this testing process. And again, help to provide guidance and information and answer your questions. And that is all I had to share. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a bit more about genetic counseling and a little bit about how it applies to the PDGENEration study.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. I appreciate you outlining that for us. And now we'll welcome back Jim to share the future directions of PDGENEration.
Thanks very much, Krista. And I know we're getting towards the top of the hour and a little bit of time to go beyond, but I will just move quickly through this if I can. And that's basically to say that when it comes to the future directions, I think it's really interesting where we're going. We've been able to get additional support in order to be able to move forward. And okay, multiple things here. I'm just going to go through them quickly. We're continued expansion, looking to reach more people with Parkinson's, as many as possible. We're integrating with technology to see if there's different opportunities to reach people through different devices for Parkinson's disease. We're through our genetic testing background and some of these secondary findings, we're looking to identify individuals with rare variants and to better understand different aspects of Parkinson's disease and related diseases. We hope to be able to survey individuals about their engagement and keep them aware. And what's really interesting, we're going to pilot, meaning on a very small scale, looking to reach out to individuals who have participated in PDGENEration, who have a genetic finding, and see if we can, ask whether they might share a link with family members to participate in the study. So this is going to be something that will probably happen in the winter. There's a lot of work to get done in front of there, and also on a pilot scale. But I think it will open up some interesting possibilities to potentially identify as a pathway novel mutations for Parkinson's disease. So if you're listening to this and you have Parkinson's disease, you're likely eligible to participate in PDGENEration. Need to be over the age of 18 is a main criterion, and certainly something you can contact your clinician or come to our website to learn more about it. And really a key thing is why you should enroll. It's about self-knowledge, about learning more about yourself and your own disease, but also to contribute to understanding about Parkinson's disease. And I also say that there are over a half a dozen companies which are looking for novel medications that will require people who have a known genetic mutation related to Parkinson's disease to participate in these studies. We'll never be able to advance them if people don't understand their genetic link to Parkinson's disease and then affirm their decision to move forward and continue to participate in research by signing up for these studies. So I encourage everyone who may be learning about PDGENEration for the first time, go to our website, parkinson.org/PDGENEration. It's a very easy process. As my colleague Jenny has outlined, there's many things to consider as you review and sign the consent form, but it's a straightforward process. You'll get a kit in the mail, as Ken said, to provide a simple blood sample for genetic analysis. And then you'll receive these results through a genetic counseling session with someone like Jenny or your clinician at the site as part of the process. And if you want to consider about sharing information about PDGENEration, we have a number of postcards and materials available on our website. You can freely download them and print them out and let your people in your community know. We're looking to ensure that the information that we gather is as generalizable as possible, including as many people from as many different genetic backgrounds as possible as part of the process. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Krista to lead our Q&A and welcome our speakers.
Thank you, Jim and Jenny for joining us. Lisa, feel free to join us as well. Lisa is able to join us live today to be a part of the conversation that we'll have. Thank you, Lisa, for being here. Jim, I'm curious, what are genetics teaching us about our health, or how can learning about genetics help support our health as we age?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our focus right here is largely on Parkinson's genetics, not broad genetics. But I think as we look to understand more about the genetics of Parkinson's disease and more information comes to fruition, we hopefully be able to utilize that to develop precision medicine for a person with Parkinson's. So precision medicine isn't always about a specific medication you take for a specific disease, but it's a holistic approach that your clinician can take, knowing details about you and including genetic information to help devise what might be the best treatment strategy for you as part of that, advising you on different medications to take or not take, or even potential things like DBS surgery, whether that's something you should consider sooner or later as part of your disease progression.
Jennifer, anything to add to that question or Jim's response?
Yeah, I think those are, really the highlight of genetic testing and where researchers hope to go is, this precision or personalized approach to medicine and understanding, genetics is kind of a piece of the puzzle. There's many other pieces that we need to put together, but that information can be extremely valuable, hopefully to the future and improving care for people with Parkinson's.
Lisa, would love to prompt you and ask you, how has knowing your genetic connection to Parkinson's influenced your health, if any way?
It's made me much more aware of what my situation is, and I can't say I'm a person with a lot of discipline, but I certainly have developed a lot more discipline in terms of diet and exercise, especially exercise, knowing that those things make a difference.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Lisa. Are there new treatment options available based on the results of PDGENEration, Jim? Are you aware of anything being developed?
New treatment options aren't available yet, meaning nothing has been approved, but that's why we started PDGENEration, because we're on the cusp of seeing that change. And what is going to be the biggest barrier is identifying people who can participate in these trials with a known genetic link to Parkinson's disease. So as I mentioned, I think in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see more studies coming. They'll be small, but we hope to continue to see them show efficacy and safety for their medicines, that we can involve more people with Parkinson's as part of the process. One has recently closed from a company called Bial, looking for people with a GBA mutation. So we're waiting to hear the results from that, but new ones are coming. And so it's a matter of being prepared. In fact, one of them is a consortium partner of the Parkinson's Foundation, Neuron 23, and they're looking for individuals who've been newly diagnosed, not taking medication, and have a unique genetic background. That's doesn't mean they have a specific genetic link that we're testing for, but they have their own proprietary algorithm as part of the process, and that ability to identify these individuals is strictly based upon researchers getting access to the data and being able to think about it in different ways in order to identify people who could be really eligible for clinical trials and the potential for new therapies for people with Parkinson's.
Thanks for helping us understand, Jim, how this is influencing future research and where we are with that now. Jenny, curious, from a participant perspective, what has been sort of a pattern or a theme when you're counseling our participants in PDGENEration, when you share those results? Could you talk a little bit about, let's say, like the felt sense that's in the room when you're sharing these results with our participants?
I think, participants, I hear a lot of gratitude, but also I think the information that they're seeking is often not necessarily for them. And I think this has been voiced that, a big motivator is to really help the research community. And, I think a lot of people get that sense of empowerment from helping research. Also, sharing information with family members, that's a huge motivator too. So I think those are probably the two things that stick out in my mind as, very common things that people talk about during the genetic counseling session.
Thank you for highlighting that. And I want to respond to John, and our colleague Maggie is comprehensively responding, John, to your questions in the Q&A. With our time, we've gone over just in a few moments, and want to just offer a moment for you all to share some final sentiments or comments about PDGENEration before we close out our webinar today. Lisa, any words to share?
Parkinson's is kind of like a black hole, not necessarily in a bad way, but there's so much we don't know about DNA, about who we are as human beings, and about Parkinson's. And the more information we get, we can't get too much information. The more information we get, the better.
Well said.
Agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jennifer, thank you for hopping on and sharing an experience of what we can expect through genetic counseling through the Parkinson's Foundation's PDGENEration. Jim, thank you for continuing to teach me more about it and sharing with our community in this way that's really encouraging us to drive research forward and to understand our role in driving that research forward and understanding our connection with Parkinson's on a deeper level. And Lisa, of course, your participation is unprecedented. Really, really appreciate the way that you engage with the Parkinson's community and the foundation here and beyond.
Just try and stop me.
And many thanks to you for joining us today for our presentation on the Parkinson's Foundation PDGENEration study. And thanks to everyone who was able to join us. And want to give gratitude to today's sponsor, Prevail Therapeutics, for supporting the mission of the Parkinson's Foundation. If we didn't get to your question, or if new ones come up as you digest and integrate this opportunity to contribute to the Parkinson's Foundation's PDGENEration study, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can call our helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO. We've got an email address if you prefer writing. And if you want to go through the comprehensive website that we've got, parkinson.org, we are here to serve you. Yeah. Until soon, my friends, thank you for being here, and I hope I see you on another webinar soon.